Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of CC Entertainer Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott J. Carroll. Today we're talking with a wonderful person. He's an author, a funny man, and he's one of the only people I know that has an article at the beginning of his name. Please welcome the Rob Cerio.
Howdy.
Rob!
Good to
Hello,
be
how are
here.
you?
How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Sitting here in the bowels of Metairie, but other than that, wonderfully.
Rob, I'm sure people are wondering, how come you get to have a V in front of your name?
Well, I paid a lot of people for it. Now, the is a joke. Okay, let me tell you something. Never let a joke get out of hand at a con. That's the lesson you should take from the in front of my name. Um, when I did my very first con, it was Contraflow #1. They had me as a guest that first year. I had only had one book published, but my wife wanted to make sure I was a big deal. Right. And so she essentially bribed a couple of her friends to follow me to panels and go, "Oh my God, it's the Rob Cerio." And unfortunately, after a few months of that, it stuck. And I remember a Contraflow like four years later. I get up, I introduce myself as Rob, and some of my friends are in the back of the room going, "Don't you mean the Rob?" And yeah, so you let the joke go on too long, it sticks. It becomes your brand, which I didn't expect. But yeah, now I'm the Rob Cerio. I also got in trouble for defacing signs at conventions, even though it wasn't me, because they give you these little placards, right? Because down
Yeah.
here, much like the one that goes on the screen when we do these things. But it says Rob Cerio, guest Rob Cerio, and inevitably somebody would take a Sharpie to it and write "the" on it, and it was never me. Never me. Usually Jen Mulvihill, who will admit to it. But yeah, but I would get fussed at. "Rob, why'd you deface your sign? We have to pay for those signs." That was not me. No one ever believed me. So now they just make the so that way nobody defaces the signs.
It's interesting you got in trouble for defacing us. They never spell my name right. Every convention I've performed, my last name is spelled wrong. So I always have to take a marker and deliberately deface mine.
Let me guess, too many O's.
No. It's not hard. It's not hard. My last name is Carroll, like an accident.
Right. Double R, double L.
Yes.
Right.
But, So, at conventions, you do a lot of selling of your books because you are an author.
I sell my books. I make jokes. I try to do both of them at the same time. It fails miserably half the time, but when it succeeds, I get that mean royalty money of 30 cents.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Ooh, yeah. We're going to have a McDonald's tonight.
So tell us a little bit about your books.
Well, I have a series of books that is Jake Price, Interdimensional Moderator. Basically, it starts from the premise that when mankind develops the ability to travel between dimensions, the first practical application they come up with is tourism. But they notice that all of the people that they send to these alternate dimensions get into trouble, they destabilize them, so they have what they call dimensional moderators to keep them out of trouble. And my guy Jake Price is one of those dimensional moderators. It gets crazy, it gets silly. The first book, he goes through various realities, stopping people from killing Hitler, which my grandfather is probably rolling over in his grave about right now. There are zombies at the Alamo, which I might have been drunk when I wrote. There's a whole scene with Speedy Gonzalez. It's a very strange book. If you like strange humor, it's for you. I also have a book called The Scientific Adventures of Mark Twain and Nikola Tesla, which is about what was the real life friendship between two of the greatest men of the 19th century. And, because at some point I found out that, Mark Twain and Nikola Tesla they hung out together. They were running buddies. They just kind of hung out and did science together. And I said, well, this is obviously something that my history teacher must have missed. And I don't know how. But when I think of their relationships, I figure Twain was probably the guy that knew all the dirty jokes, and Tesla was the guy with all the cool toys. So they hung out together. They did science. They had fun. Mine is a historical fiction version of that. and very much my take on the character. But I got a very great compliment from a friend of mine once about one of the Twain quotes that I use in my book that I had actually made up, and that they thought was a legitimate quote from Mark Twain. So I couldn't get higher praise than that. So.
He's one of the most quotable.
Oh,
They're so
absolutely,
good. I
absolutely.
think Twain and Churchill are kind of on the same level of snark with their
Oh,
quotes.
absolutely. And the man was petty. It's like, yes, there's a lot to love about Sam Clemens, and so I was delighted to be able to write him as a character in my fiction.
Mhm.
And I actually it started as a short story, but then I started writing more of them, and before I knew it, I had essentially an entire novel based around the two characters. So, but yeah, definitely worth it. Exhaustively researched. If people can pull apart my history in it, I will buy them a Twinkie. Um, because a 30-cent royalty, I can afford a Twinkie.
Or you could just take those 30 cents and buy the Twinkies now. They'll last forever. So in 30 years, if someone
That is a popular misconception, my friend. the
do go
Twinkies
on.
do have a shelf life. Let me tell you what happened back in when they took Twinkies off the shelf, and I invested my entire portfolio in Twinkies, only to open a closet full of moldy Twinkies like a month later. My wife won't let
You,
me live that one down.
you okay? You need a second?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Twinkies are back. Okay, I'm good now. Continue.
So I did read your first Jake Price book, and I really loved the side plot with the scientist killing Hitler. That was a ton of fun. Then and your books are the books are they're fun, and it's when you read them you get a sense that you do like to have fun, you do like to do things, and at
Yeah.
conventions you also do get into some trouble every now and then.
Not as much as some people I know, but yeah, I do. I wouldn't call it trouble so much as shenanigans. Uh, there have been a lot of different escapades, some of which I don't think I could talk about on the air. There's one that involves go karts and a certain podcast host that I could mention, but I'm not going to.
I think one of my favorite convention stories is you were an innocent bystander in all this. This was something that I had done with our friend Eris. There was a convention where they forgot to lock the cages that went up into a catwalk.
Oh my God. The Spotlight story. Yes, yes, I remember the Spotlight story.
Uh,
Oh, okay.
for
Go ahead.
Please, for those who don't know this story, Rob and I were both at a convention, and it was held in a big arena. And they didn't lock the cages that went up to the catwalk. If you're in a theater or an arena, that's like the metal railway that people go and they walk around and they use the spotlights. They also didn't turn off power to their spotlights.
Well, because
So
generally they assume people are mature enough that they're not just gonna climb up onto a catwalk and activate one.
okay, okay. To be fair, I grew up in a theater, and that's just what you do.
So
So they
there I
went up.
am at a panel, and all of a sudden there's this bright shining light in my eyes. I'm like, Grandpa, is it my time yet? But no, I look up and there's Scott and Eris on the catwalk with the spotlight going. And
And it wasn't.
my favorite part is that they basically sat up there, had to be for almost an hour, just like
It
seeing if
was.
people would notice that they were in the spotlight.
It was so long. Like nobody came by to tell us to get down either. It got to a point where we were taking the spotlight and we were moving it around and having people chase it like a cat chasing a laser dot around the area.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Well, what else are you gonna do with a bunch of anime kids dressed like cats?
Well, that's some of the fun you can have at conventions. It's great. Well, there was also the one where they gave us weapons.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that. Part of our goodie bag selection was the ability to make a small trebuchet. No, sorry, crossbow. It was a
Yeah.
crossbow, and they gave us little office equipment and instructions of how to build it. And of course, immediately I look over to the table next to me where Scott is sitting there, quietly just grinning at me. And Eris is next to him, frantically trying to put hers together. and I, not to be outdone, I'm not going to allow my neighbors to develop arms and not be able to defend myself. So I rapidly put mine together, and I look over, and Scott has used his office supplies to make a little log cabin that he
I was
called his
being
Museum of Peace, if I recall.
I was being Switzerland. I was being completely. I was not being involved. I would have held on to all of your gold while you two fought.
Yes, there you are, Switzerland. Hey, why are those V2 rockets firing overhead at my neighbor? Yes. Unfortunately, Scott's Little Museum of Peace was the first casualty
It was the
of
first
the war.
thing
Look,
there was no
I'm
peace
sorry,
after that.
dude. It had it coming, and quite frankly, you shouldn't have built in a war zone. you were the DMZ effectively. I know you think you were neutral, but you were the DMZ between the proud people of Rob Sylvania and the Eris land. Okay, so I'm sorry, dude. It had to happen.
So this is the kind of mental breakdown people have when we have to sit at tables at conventions for 18 hours a day.
Dude, that was like hour 2.
I know. We broke
really
down
early
fast.
in the con that we went with it. Yeah.
They supplied us with weapons. It was all downhill from there.
And what got me, well, we didn't think you'd actually use them. Why would you not think we would use them?
Mutually assured destruction is a thing.
Seriously. You obviously don't hang out with enough creative people to think if you give them the stuff to create weapons, they're not going to create weapons. I mean, you give 2 guys a stick each, and the next thing you know, there's a sword fight.
I built this death ray for peaceful purposes, Your Honor. But that's just like one aspect of what it's like to run a table at a convention.
Yeah.
What are some of the things people don't know about what it's like to run a table?
How much you have to engage other people. Don't get me wrong. I love talking to people, and more importantly, I love talking to con people, because generally you have the most fascinating conversations. But being nice to everyone for 12 hours a day is difficult. Behind that table, you've got to smile. Yes, you look like an intelligent man. Why don't you take a look at my books? Oh, sorry, I don't read. What do you mean you don't read? No, I can't say that. No. Then buy one for your cousin. Cousin don't read either. Yeah, it can be very frustrating at times, but it has its rewards. I guess that's the takeaway.
Yeah, and you're right. The amount of energy you need, especially if you're running a table and doing a show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You and I have done shows together.
Yes, we have.
We do the table all day, and then we have to try to find time for food, and then we go and do shows. One of my favorite shows we've done is the radio play one.
Yeah, definitely. Suicide Radio. Actually, it was the idea of a friend of ours. And the idea is that you get some old-fashioned radio scripts and you read them cold in front of an audience, and everybody takes a role. And I found this great one. This from the old Superman radio play that actually had Batman smacking Robin upside the head as part of the stage directions, no less. And I was like, oh, we have to do this. We just have to. How can we not? But we've always gotten great reactions from it. And and using the audience as our Foley was really inspired too, making everyone else make the sound effects as they come up in the script.
That show taught me two weird things. One was that in those radio plays, Robin's nickname for Batman was Pappy.
Yeah, it was. It was a very different time, Scott.
Well, the script you found was also historically important, and we didn't realize
Yeah.
it at first. The script you found was done during the time when they were using the radio serials, specifically the Superman ones, to speak out against the Klan.
That's right. That's right. And it was great because they basically someone had impersonated Batman. We find out later in the story. I'm sorry, spoilers for a
No!
70-year-old radio show, but someone was impersonating Batman, and they do this speech at Madison Square Garden that was full of lots of hate rhetoric. And it was really horrible, the stuff they were saying, and yet oddly familiar for
Yeah,
that particular
weird.
time. They were going to build a wall. It was it was disturbing at the very least. But then there in the middle of it, there's this narration. The narrator comes in and starts talking about ostriches, I believe.
Yes.
he's like, would you want to be like the ostrich and hide your head in the sand when you see hatred? Don't do that. Superman wouldn't. And it overall had this wonderful positive message about accepting others, as particularly immigrants, into our society, and helping them to succeed and make America better for it. And when we were reading that, all of us on the panel were like, wow, this is like really timely and deep, and who knew?
Because like you said, you gave us the scripts cold. We didn't get to see them ahead of time.
That's right.
And you gave me the narrator, so I'm just looking through, and all of a sudden there's just a page with a block of text. And I'm like, oh God, what is this going to be? And then it is. It's this wonderful, impassioned speech. And it was a ton of fun, and I love doing that. And the like watching the audience go from what is
what ostriches? What the hell is he talking about? What has Rob done to them? And then oh yeah, huh? And then of course it is a mixed bag, because we also did a Captain Midnight speech at one point.
No,
that the look on Scott's face, ladies and gentlemen, says it all. Okay, it was so inflammatory and so racist. I mean, even for the 40s, racist, that we couldn't even get through it. I mean, it was really bad. It offended all of us on the panel, and we're like, you know what? Maybe we should do something else. And it led into the Scott Improv show.
yeah. We felt so bad for the audience. We had to do like a little improv show to make up for the terrible thing that we just did.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be both. I vet them a little more strongly now. I make sure I actually read more than just like the first page or two. But they're always fun and always a blast to do. That one and the Steampunk Tech one are probably my two favorites to do. The Steampunk Tech panel, basically I lead people through the process of creating a steampunk invention that you use in fiction. And it's not so much about the device as the story that comes from creating the device. And at one point we made an ether ship. Basically it was a spaceship, in steampunk world. And we talked about realistic things like, how much air would they have to bring, how much food would they have to bring, are we going to have the moon the way it actually is, or are we going to make it like they thought it was in the late 1800s, where they thought there was an atmosphere and there might be creatures, and it led to the invasion of the moon men. And what really got me about that one panel, the reason I think about that to this day, is that there's this little girl sitting in the front row, dressed as a flower, no less, right? Most adorable little thing you've ever seen in your life. And they're talking about wanting to subjugate the moon men and take their albino dinosaurs or something like that. and the little girl raises her hand, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the little girl saying, do we have to kill them? She's like, can we give them blankets filled with smallpox? And I looked at her and I'm like, wow, how many of these panels have to end in genocide? And the one before that, they placated the people at the center of the earth with Netflix and beer. That's how that one ended. And then we had one where they made a time machine and they wound up in 1950s Argentina, right over the farm of a German farmer that came from nowhere at all. It's always an entertaining panel to do. It's always a lot of fun to do. It always gets the point across of, people ask writers where they get their ideas. Well, let's sketch out an airship. You'll see where we get our ideas. So it's a wonderful
So,
panel to do.
yeah, speaking about writing, you actually gave me some really wonderful advice that I don't know if I ever got to thank you for. Because I know you always get the questions of where do you get your ideas. I'm sure that's
Yeah,
one of the questions you're kind of sick of hearing.
yeah. We
Uh,
pay the homeless guy down the street $1.50 for him.
yeah. Um, when I was writing my first book, one of the pieces of advice that you gave me was after you've written it out, swap the first and second chapter.
Oh yeah. That's
And
it.
I did that, and it actually helped solve a whole bunch of problems.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it was this
I
wonderful
found.
little.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. No. I'll sit here and
No,
take the
no, no.
praise for a
I'm
little while
sorry.
longer.
Please, you go ahead. No, no, no,
You go
no.
ahead, sir. Please.
Oh, no, no,
By
no, tell
all
me sorry.
means, sir.
Tell me sorry.
No, I got that piece of advice a very long time ago, from a close friend, and it works every time. I mean, because generally the way we tend to write, especially if you're like a seat of the pants writer like I am, and like unlike you are to a degree as well, where you don't really plot it out in advance, you just kind of go with the flow. You
Hmm.
don't wind up really getting to the meat of the story until chapter 2, and so putting that, I mean, you still need the information in chapter 1. So by swapping the 2 chapters, it drops the reader right into the middle of the story, right into the action.
Yeah, it helped. It was absolutely wonderful advice.
Well, I'm glad I
Uh,
could help.
yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, no, 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 no! Please, thank
Oh
you.
no
No,
no
no,
no!
no, no, no,
Thank
no, no,
you, sir.
no. Is is there a piece of advice for writing that you wished you'd gotten years ago, or just a piece of advice that you still hold true to?
Rejection is part of the job. Yeah, that's something that I really wish I had taken to heart earlier in my career. Picture it. 1988. Young Rob Cerio puts in his first submission to let's see, I think it was Fantasy and Sci-Fi magazine was what I put it into. And I had heard, yeah, you're gonna get a rejection letter, blah blah blah. But I really thought my stuff was good. And I got that first rejection letter and it killed me. It was actually from the editor, and it wasn't like a carbon either. It wasn't like just a form copy either. The editor himself had actually taken the time out to write to me and say roughly, okay, we didn't need this one, the story didn't hook us, but we want to see more stuff from you. And I
Hmm.
completely ignored that part of the letter. All I saw was, we don't want your story. And boy, if I could go back in time and strangle an 18-year-old Rob, I would. Like that's the point at which I should have kept going, and I didn't know it at the time. But yeah, just there's a famous story about how Stephen King, when he first started doing his work, he put all of his rejection letters on a nail above his
Hmm.
bedpost, and by the time he actually got published, it was a railroad spike full of rejection letters that was on his bedpost. So don't give up. It happens. Rejection is part of the game, and
Hmm.
everyone can find, especially now in our modern day of the internet, and everyone can find an audience. And no matter how obscure you think your writing is, someone will like it. There's literally an audience out there for almost anything. So
This is true, and I don't have it with me right now, but I knew my first rejection letter was coming, and I have it framed.
mm,
And I actually have it framed, and I hang it up in my room, so I know that whatever project I'm going to start or work on, or if it's an audition, whatever, I can look at that rejection letter and know, yeah, it's probably not going to happen, but I can still do other things, or
yeah,
I can still
yeah,
keep going.
yeah,
Uh,
and that's the thing, is don't be afraid to try. Odd stuff, different things, because
mhm.
you never know when you're going to find something that someone, it's perfect for the next anthology that you hear about. I mean, I wrote about one about a pizza delivery guy who, when he's cutting the pizza, he accidentally creates a summoning circle out of it. And pizza demon, of course, and I'm like, yeah, this is the stupidest thing I've ever written. I put it away for a long time, and then there was a call for a Tales from the Dark Pizza or something like that was the name of the anthology. I forget what it would turn out to be. And I was like, oh my god, I have the perfect submission for this, and so I handed it in. It got rejected because, well, it's one of those things. A lot of times when you're a writer, people think you can write anything. and that's not
Mm,
the case.
yeah.
I have my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is comedy, and this was a more straight up horror. And horror is not my voice. My voice is comedy. My voice is tongue in cheek. My voice is sarcasm. I'll do some sarcasm, but horror, no, 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 not my thing. So,
Since we're on the subject of writing, what do you think? What is the best criticism that you've ever received?
the best criticism.
Yeah,
Um, I'd have to think about that a bit more. The best praise I've ever gotten, somebody actually compared me to Isaac Asimov and Douglas Adams, like in
that.
one
Yeah,
breath. I was like, because for those of you who have never read, first of all, go read a book. Second of all, um, Douglas Adams is one of the best sci-fi comedy writers in history. He wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, among many other things, and he's my personal hero. He's somebody whose work I model mine after, and mind you, I think he will always be better at it than I am, even though posthumously he'll still always be better at it than I will ever be. But the fact that I got compared to him was just so flattering and so wonderful. As far as actually, no, you want a criticism story? I got a criticism story for you. um, One of the things about working conventions the way I do, is that you get a lot of librarians that come
hmm
by the author book tables, right? And all of them want to read the latest one. So there's librarians, there's English teachers, get a lot of English teachers too, right? And at some point, I sold one of my books, and it was a self-published book, and I admit that I probably could have done a better job at editing it, looking for typos and things like that. And so I sold it to the woman, and the next convention she saw me at, she comes back with my book in her hand, with little red marks in all the margins for every typo for 238 pages, and I'm like, was it really that bad? Oh, she's like, oh no, I love the story, but it got distracting. And I'm like, okay. So I gave her a new book, and she's like, what, do you want me to do this one too? I said no. I said, but I do want the copy you just handed me, so that way I can make the next version, the next release of this one better. And
right.
and that's exactly what I wound up doing. But yeah, the fact that woman just handed me back this book with all the highlighted and typo mistakes pointed out to me, yeah, it was kind of rough. Don't let
Yeah.
Microsoft Word tell you what's a typo and what's not, particularly in science fiction when half the phrases it doesn't really understand. Okay.
There's a reason. There's a reason Clippy got fired.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Rob, we are just about out of time.
Okay.
I really wish we had more time. We want to talk more about comedy and writing, but maybe next time.
Yeah.
Uh, so where can people find your stuff? Where can people
Um,
see the Rob Cerio?
I am online on Amazon. All my books are available on Amazon.com. Just search Rob Cerio, Robert Cerio, and with a Cerio. That's how you spell it. Yeah, just search for my books there, and you'll find me.
All right, fantastic. Rob, thank you so much for
It's
sitting
been a
down and
pleasure.
talking. It's absolutely wonderful to see you again. I can't wait to see you again at the next convention, which should hopefully be soon.
Yes.
In the meantime, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Please go check out Rob's stuff and stay tuned next week. I've been your host, Scott J. Carroll.